Secretary, for the introduction, and thank you all for taking the time to come hear about this wonderful program. I applaud you all for inquiring about CPI and researching possible opportunities for your special preschooler. Hopefully tonight I can provide you a little bit of information and answer some questions to assist you. Tonight we're going to discuss the following topics. I'm going to give a brief overview of CPI, and then I will discuss the steps towards possible enrollment. After I review the process, I will show you CPI point of contact information for future use and reference. CPI stands for the Chesapeake Preschool Initiative. It is a free preschool program supported by the state for at-risk 4-year-olds. It is a full-day experience, so that means it is in alignment with the traditional elementary school day, and attendance is 5 days a week. Like I mentioned, CPI follows the elementary and primary school times, so the day starts at 7:35 and it ends at 2:04. The CPI program sites are located at 7 schools, but please know we serve eligible students from across the entire city. For schools that do not have CPI physically in their buildings, they have a partner CPI school that will host them for CPI preschool. Just as an example, if your child is zoned for Grassfield Elementary, then your child will attend Camelot Elementary for CPI. Please note that transportation is provided by Chesapeake Public Schools, so your child may ride the bus to school. As for the classroom, I'm proud to say that CPI has a 1-to-9 ratio, meaning that there are 18 students in a class with 2 highly qualified educators, a teacher and a teacher assistant. On the side of the screen, I have a sample schedule to show you an example of a typical day. The day is structured to be developmentally appropriate for 4-year-olds with a big day for pre-K curriculum that focuses on social interaction, social emotional development, along with academic learning in math, science, history, and literacy with an intertwining curriculum of music, movement, and art. All of these combined help your child with kindergarten readiness. Please note that the day consists of an opportunity for breakfast, lunch, and snack, and there is a nap that is about an hour long that occurs daily. Since this is a program designed to prepare for school readiness for at-risk preschoolers, please understand that this is not a first-come, first-served program, and enrollment at the schools is not automatic. In order to be accepted into the CPI program, there is a specific criteria that has to be met in order to be found eligible. Your child needs to be fully potty trained, 4 years old by September 30th, 2021, a Chesapeake resident, and align with at least one of the risk factors. Some of the at-risk factors are listed here, but please note that this does not include all of the possible factors. Due to the requirement of meeting an at-risk criteria, a screening has to be conducted in order to determine eligibility. So let's take a moment to go over each of the steps for possible acceptance and enrollment. First, you will need to apply, and I will go over the applying details in a minute. But after you apply, the CPI secretary will reach out to you to schedule a screening appointment. The screening will be with a parent or guardian, and it is done over the phone. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes to complete. Then the final step is to wait for an acceptance. You will be notified via mail of your status somewhere around mid to end of June. If accepted, you will receive directions for completing the online registration and information for enrolling your child at your designated CPI school. So like I mentioned before, applying is your first step. Applications are available on the CPS preschool website, and they also can be picked up from every elementary and primary school. When completing the application, please make sure you complete the front, the back, and don't forget to sign the bottom. And when you're ready to submit the application and the supporting documents, which I will discuss next, please email them to the email provided, cpscpi@cpschools.com. This email is also noted in the directions when you retrieve your application. These are the required documents that need to be submitted electronically when you submit your application. You can scan the documents or take a picture of them and send them through your email. We're going to need the child's birth certificate, identification of the parent or guardian, and proof of residence. For proof of residence, it can be a power bill, water bill, or gas bill. If you do not have any of these utility bills in your name, please reach out to the CPI department so we can give you guidance on how best to support your individual circumstance. We will also need you to submit your family's proof of income. This can include your most recent W-2s or 2 of your most recent pay stubs. For more proof of income options, please consult our department or refer to the directions on the application. In some circumstances, there are additional documents that will need to be sent. Please take note of the if applicable documents to see if they apply to you and your family. Just as a reminder, these will be sent electronically with a completed signed application to cpscpi@cpschools.com. So as I wrap up, I wanted to showcase the preschool webpage that has the application for CPI, as well as the other preschool opportunities offered by Chesapeake Public Schools. To navigate to this page, you can go to cpschools.com, academic dropdown, preschool opportunities, or you can search for CPI or preschool within the search bar. Please also notice there is a blue link to email me if you have any questions in the future. The CPI department phone number is underneath my email as well. But for quicker reference tonight, I have included them on the next slide. The top 2 contact methods are for application and document submission. And of course, you can use them to reach out for answers and questions. The bottom one is my personal email, and you are more than welcome to use that for questions as well. But just a reminder that the application and documents are sent to the CPS CPI email, please. So with that, I want to take a moment to thank the FACE team of Chesapeake Public Schools for hosting tonight's webinar, and perhaps we have some time to go into some Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. We actually do have a few questions. One of the questions that we have is there a limited amount of space for CPI? Like, do you have a certain amount of classes per school? How does that work?
Yes, ma'am. Good question. So our cap is we want 18 students per class, but depending on the school, depends on how many classrooms there are at the facility. So some of our schools only have 2 classrooms, and thankfully some of our schools also have 4 classrooms. So it just really depends on which buildings we are referring to.
Okay, and another parent asked, what is considered at risk?
At risk is, it goes back to those identifiers that I briefly mentioned before. It's something that the state has identified through research to be able to help bridge the gap of at-risk students, so that way we can try to firm up that readiness so that way students can come into kindergarten and start their educational journey strong.
Okay. Now another question, ASD, special needs students, will they be in a separate class or included in the CPI classes?
Very good question. That also depends on the IEP and the least restrictive environment. We take each of those cases on a one-to-one individual basis. I highly encourage you to apply, and we can discuss at our screening our options and next steps.
Okay, perfect. And does if applicable mean optional, or do you just leave it blank? What do you do in that case?
Great question. So yes, ma'am. So if applicable means it's optional. If you are unsure if it applies to you or not, by all means, you can contact our CPI department, and we'll be there to help support you and figure out if that pertains to your needs.
Okay. Is the application only online, or can you also do it in person?
The application is online, but it is also being able to be picked up at the local schools for a hard copy if you prefer, and they are located at all the primary and all the elementary schools.
Okay, and will this application be available in different languages?
Currently, right now, it is in English. However, it is anticipated to be translated to Spanish.
Okay, great. What WIC information is needed exactly?
Any type of proof of affiliation. my biggest recommendation is send an approval letter, or if you don't have that, you may send the card.
Okay, and do you have any, what's the qualification for income? Is there a set qualification for income?
There is an income qualification. There's actually different brackets depending on what the country depends on income, poverty levels. However, that is just one of the many at-risk factors that we have that can help qualify you for this program. So even if you are not inside of that poverty income level, I highly encourage you to still apply because there might be other risk factors that qualify you.
Okay, and if my child just turned 4, are they still eligible to participate in this year's CPI program, or do they have to wait till next year?
If they just turned 4 this year, they would have to be for next year because they need to be 4 on or before September 30th of 2021. So they would be for this upcoming preschool year.
Okay, and can military families apply?
Absolutely. We love having military families, and I highly encourage you to. Thank you.
Okay, there's a foster parent on the line, and she has, she wants to know, should the social worker apply for the child, or can she apply for the child?
I would have the foster parent apply. However, we will work with you on that individual basis if we need the social worker to get involved.
Okay, and are you allowing any children who are not at risk to enter the CPI program, or are there other programs that they could possibly reach out to our school to receive information on?
Good question. So because of this being a state-funded program that is for at-risk students, all of the children have to follow under the bracket of being at risk. However, if your child does not qualify, we do have reverse mainstream, which could be another option that you might be interested in through Chesapeake Public Schools. So I highly recommend that you take a moment to check out our preschool website, and more information is on there as well.
Okay, and this question, I'm not sure, this might be more of a technical question about signing the document. How do they sign the document electronically?
Most of our parents actually print it out and sign it with a pen, and then they take a picture of it and send it electronically through their email.
Great idea.
That's how most of them are done. However, if you have to sign it electronically, there's usually a digital signature that you need, or perhaps you can reach out to our CPI department, and I have a wonderful assistant that helps out, and she might be able to walk you through it as well.
Yes, and I think sometimes Google does allow you to have an electronic signature, and I think Google has an Adobe thing that's free, so that might be an option as well. Great question. I have custody of my granddaughter, court and paperwork. But I have to apply for the birth certificate. Will my application be kicked out for that reason?
Absolutely not, no ma'am. So if you have to apply for the birth certificate, we have a separate form that you can fill out that verifies that you are in the process of that, and that will not kick out your application.
Okay. And if my child needs to go to after school care, will the bus be able to provide transportation for them to go to aftercare?
That one gets a little stickier, and we'd have to have an individual one-on-one conversation that we can absolutely have during the training. If the bus is zoned, or excuse me, if the daycare is zoned within that school zoning, then buses possibly could drop off. But again, we would have to talk about that on a one-on-one basis.
Okay, and I've got 3 questions that are kind of in relation to income. Is there somewhere that parents could actually go, maybe on the web, to find out a little more about income verification as far as guidelines are concerned, and the WIC program?
I highly recommend, if you're interested in seeing those poverty levels, to perhaps Google it a little bit and do some little bit research on that. We have our guidance that we're given as VPI coordinators, but I cannot release that at this time.
Okay, perfect. Where can they find a full list of at-risk factors?
So that one's a little bit tricky. I've gone through training as a VPI coordinator to be able to identify some of the at-risk factors. It's such an important piece to be able to have that one-on-one conversation with the parent. Because we have our state large factors that we're going to identify, but then there are some local factors that I have that apply as well. And if that's something that we can talk about in our individual screening as well, if the parent has more inquiry on that.
All right, great job. And let me ask you about the deadline. What is the turnaround time? Once the application is submitted, what's the turnaround? And when are applications going to be available for parents?
Okay, so applications are currently available now. There is a little bit of a turnaround in terms of waiting for a screening, because you can imagine it is popular season right now. So once you submit all your required paperwork along with your completed application, my secretary will reach out to you and she will schedule an appointment. Roughly, that's anywhere from figure about a week turnaround at the most. And then once we have our screening, then the notifications will be sent out around mid-June.
Okay. Now, we have a question about potty training. Does the child have to be potty trained by the screening time or by the time they start school?
Good question. I highly recommend being potty trained by the screening time, because we need to ensure that is effective and in place, because it is definitely a mandatory requirement for entering school. And I would hate for you to have your child try to enter school and then not have that in place.
Okay. And is this different from the reverse mainstream program? Is CPI different from the reverse mainstream program?
Yes, ma'am. It is definitely different. CPI is a full day program. Reverse mainstream is a half day. If you're interested in comparing the difference, you're welcome to go on the Chesapeake Public School preschool website, and you'll get a little bit more information about reverse mainstream. And Tawanda Shirley is the point of contact for that preschool program.
Lisa, I think
Okay, great. Yes.
the two are combined. This one question, there, if your child has
Yes.
speech therapy, is that one of the risk factors?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Speech is a risk factor.
Okay, and I know you listed the schools. Is Cedar Road Elementary a CPI program? Do they have a CPI? Okay.
Yes.
So that school will actually
not.
be, okay. And so they would actually go to another school that will host all the Cedar Road Elementary parent or kids.
Yes, ma'am. Currently at this time, Cedar
Okay.
Road is not a CPI school, so they would be serviced through B.M. Williams.
Okay. Do you need the front and back of a parent ID and WIC card?
No, you just need the front.
Okay. Is divorce considered an at-risk factor?
It is definitely a factor that plays into the application process, and so you would want to make sure you share that with us at the screening.
Okay, and there's one question about special needs, and the child is not potty trained, but I want to just reiterate, they can refer to our website, is that correct? For more information as far as, getting accommodations or finding programs for your child with special needs. You can also contact our office, the FACE office at 757-482-5923. And we have one of our specialists will be more than happy to talk with you to find a program to fit your needs of your child. There's a question about applications being PDFs. Can that be open in a document, in a doc hub, which is like, I guess, a Google hub?
Good question. You cannot send them right now currently through a Google Doc. For some reason, it doesn't transfer very well and it skews everything. So please make sure you're sending that through an email, through a picture, or perhaps a PDF.
Okay. Transportation, is that optional? So if parents would like to drop off their kids, can they drop off their kids to the CPI program?
That is absolutely a choice. You can definitely drop off your child at the school and pick it up. I just highly encourage you to please, just like any other grade, have on-time pick up and drop off.
Okay, and a parent asked about their child just turning 4. Will they go on a waiting list or something? So if the child turned 4, they can apply for next year's CPI program. Is that correct?
That is
if
correct.
They're already 4 now,
correct.
They just can't apply for this year's program.
Correct.
Okay.
That would be for next year, and you would be screened.
Okay, and do we have a deadline? Did we state that already?
you want to get your application in no later than May, so that way we can get those acceptance letters out by June.
Okay.
Lisa,
this is a residence. Yes.
I do know there was
Go
a
ahead.
question about some other programs for kids who are at risk. I do suggest that they may contact the Faith Center. I'll be more than happy to assist them.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I want to make sure that we reiterate that, again, if your child is just turning 4, they cannot go on a waiting list for the 2021 school year. They would actually apply for the 2022 school year. So we want to make sure we have that understood. You can't apply for this year's program, but for next school year, which is 2021, 2022, you can apply for that. Is that correct, Lauren? I want to make sure I get that.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. Thank you for clarifying that. And I also want to make sure the parents understand that risk factors are also on the application as well.
Okay. And if you have a child that's already in Chesapeake Public Schools, you have to get residency approved. Can you use that same residency form, or do you have to get a new one for the new student?
That is a wonderful question. If you have a question about enrollment, you're welcome to contact student enrollment so they can make sure that they align you with the correct answer for your needs.
Okay. All right, perfect. The CPI programs, the schools that offer the CPI program, is there a place where parents can go, again, to find out what schools have the CPI program?
Can you clarify that question for me, please?
I guess they want to know exactly which schools offer the CPI program, even though they may be zoned for a school that is not, doesn't physically house CPI.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a list of schools that actually, and I think we already said that in our email, is there a place where they can just go to the website and find that information?
Absolutely. It's on our website.
Okay.
You can check that out.
Okay, perfect. And I think that'll take care. Someone asked about Southwestern being a site for CPI. Speech, it is. Okay. And speech and occupational therapy, would that be offered to a student that's in the CPI program?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think we're getting
I think we
towards
pretty
the
much
end.
got to the end.
Yeah. Let's see. If a child's accepted into the CPI program, can they go to that school for kindergarten?
Kindergarten is designated off your zoning. So if, for example, I'll take that one example I gave earlier about Grassfield, which feeds into Camelot. Camelot is host to you for only the CPI year. So the very next year when the child goes to kindergarten, they would have to return to the home school.
I guess finally, if you could clarify the age as far as when they have to be 4 by, just to clarify that as far as who would be eligible for this year.
Absolutely. So you have to be 4 by September 30th of 2021. So that is this upcoming September. So that means if your child is currently 4 right now, and all the way up to September, if your child is 3 in September but turns 4, let's say on September 15th, you are still eligible for next year to be able to attend CPI, assuming you meet all those criteria. I think you're muted, Ms. Sherry.
So sorry. Working from home, he had the dog bark. He wanted to go out of all times. A question about breakfast. Is breakfast provided for CPI students?
Breakfast is an option. It is not, well, this year, of course, we have the wonderful grants that are in place. In terms for next year, they would have to apply for free and reduced to be able to be eligible for that. But it is an option and it is offered to the student.
Okay. I think that's
Did you see the last one, Lisa?
No, I didn't see that. Do you have that question?
It's a child who's enrolled in OT through the early intervention program. They want to know if the school already has that information, or is it something that they'll have to redo if they are accepted into this 4-year program?
I highly recommend attaching everything that pertains to your child, whether it be IEP, whether it be intervention programs, with your packet, so that way we can best screen and support you.
Okay, and is the once the application is completed, do they email the application or do they submit it? Is there a submit button on the application?
Good question. There's not an actual submit button, so you'll have to email it to the CPI department.
Okay. All right. Great. Looks like we've answered all the questions. If by some chance we did not answer your question, don't worry. Ms. Perez will actually get a copy of all the questions that we asked. Excuse me, Ms. Perez will get a question, all the questions, and she will be able to either her secretary or she will get back with you in reference to the answers. Again, a lot of this information can be found on our Chesapeake Public Schools page. If you go under CPI, you can find all the information that you need. Again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact Mrs. Perez. Her number is listed here on the screen. And at this time, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this powerful preschool initiative webinar. We hope that we answered most of your questions. And again, we know that after the completion, you may have some additional questions, but please feel free to reach out either to Mrs. Perez or to our Family and Community Engagement Department. Remember, families and communities work better together. Ms. Perez, thank you for joining us tonight, and everyone, have a great evening.